Hi everyone, Richard Lewis here. I've not long been back from Bucharest and I'm settling down for a day's work. And I've had lots of messages about this Colin Cowherd chap. I don't know if you've been following it, but he's an ESPN radio broadcaster who's had a few things to say about eSports. Nothing new, just the same stuff we've heard before. It's not a real sport. If he ever had to commentate on it, he'd leave the company. And the same tired jokes about us all being nerds and whatnot. And I've had a lot of messages saying I should rip into this guy and tear apart his point of view. But as I see it, there's really no need. I can't get outraged about this at all. For as long as I remember, gamers have been under attack by the mainstream media anyway. So we're all nerds or gaming addicts or school shooters and now misogynists. Whatever label they need to apply for a quick story. And frankly, this attack by Cowherd is tame by those repellent standards. Equally, we shouldn't feel threatened because our success has continued. It's prevailed despite these attacks down the years. Traditional TV broadcasting looks at our streaming model with envy. And when there's no sensationalism required, the print media is desperately trying to write about us in a relevant way to get our demographic of young people to engage with their dying medium. The biggest games launches are spectacles that eclipse Hollywood movie launches, and in 2015, just a few months at the upcoming E3, you're going to see that every games developer is cognizant of what esports is and why our generations love it so much. So given our new size, stature and success, I think we can certainly entertain the opinion of a 51-year-old sports radio broadcaster. And his comments alone show he's done no research whatsoever into the topic. He references Donkey Kong and Harry Potter, which shows he's relatively divorced from the development of modern internet-based culture as a whole. So to get outraged at his opinion, which is clearly steeped in ignorance, is to play the game, and in particular, his game. Now, Cowherd, he's a sports shock jock, so you should know what their bread and butter is. When something is topical, they adopt a contrary standpoint, and not so contrary to be radical and therefore marginalised and no one agrees with you, but contrary enough to appeal to a vocal but sizable minority. That right there's the art of being a successful shock jock. And he knows that, and he knows that by criticising competitive gaming as not belonging to the pantheon of real sports, he'll find support of that viewpoint among an older generation who are entrenched in their worldview, even if that view, for the most part, is rapidly changing in those under 30. So Cowherd's particular modus operandi is to wade into a talking point and just be as controversial and as scattergun as possible, typically under the guise of free speech or telling it like it is. And he's well known for this. So when criticising John Wall, the point guard of the Washington Wizards, he stopped just short of racially abusing the player. And this is all calculated, of course. He was using language like, yo dog, look at me, and saying the player lacked IQ judgment, and even made a comparison to robbing a bank while criticising the player's stupidity. All of this while talking about a black basketball player. Now, what had Wall done to inspire such ire? Well, the trigger seemed to be the fact that Wall did a celebratory dance in front of his own fans in a packed stadium. So, Cowherd didn't even shy away from criticising the way the player was raised by his father. He has a belief that is on the record. You can look at this for yourself, that if you are to be in a leadership role in a team sport like football, where you're the quarterback, for example, or basketball, where you're the point guard, you need a decent father figure in your life to pass on those leadership skills. I don't really know where he gets this theory from, but he believes it. I suppose he's entitled to his opinion, right? But of course, it was well documented that Wall's father, who had been absent for most of his life, had died of cancer when he was only 8 years old. So to criticise him on that ground seemed, well, outrageous, I think. But that's how Cowherd likes to operate. He got back into Racebaiting again when he praised Oregon for containing wonderful people and said a virtue of which was that they were mostly white. And again, this is an almost certainly calculated sentence rather than off the cuff and clunky as he would later declare it to be in his apology. It got people talking, and mostly about whether or not he was a racist. But there's nothing in that sentence that is damning enough to really say that he is. So he's free from network reprisals, and he's generated a bunch of attention for himself. How very clever. And then when the 24-year-old safety for the Washington Redskins, Sean Taylor, was murdered at gunpoint, Cowherd said that the player's past had caught up with him and he'd somehow brought it upon himself. And this was just one day after the incident had happened. Now, sure, the footballer had a checkered past and had turned it round. He'd been involved in a few incidents with the police. But Cowherd, just for the purposes of generating a talking point, made these unsubstantiated claims that the murder was somehow linked to all of that. And they weren't. It was proven it was just a burglary that had gone wrong. I can think of fewer things that are more vile, really, than to sort of falsely smear someone who is dead while the family is still grieving, and you're doing it in exchange for attention and monetary gain. But this is the unfortunate reality of the shock jock personality and the business that they're in. You've got to be part journalist, you've got to be part personality, celebrity, entertainer. You've got to also be part huckster. You've got to be able to repackage something that isn't really that new and sell it to an audience who lap it up. So when there's when there's a news story getting global coverage, the way that a shock jock will attract attention to themselves is often to say the things no one else will. And people don't say those things not because there's some sort of truth that is suppressed or they lack courage, but more often than not, it's simply because they have more taste, more inherent decency, and are more in tune with their reporting responsibilities and obligations. Shock jocks don't have it easy. Once you fulfill that role and you enter into that pact with a network who supports you, you are pretty much required to have an opinion on everything. Your fans and audience will expect them, and there's not really an option to avoid the talking point of the day. But in an industry that moves 100 miles a minute, how is it reasonable to expect those opinions to be informed? And indeed, the recurring theme in all of these examples I've given, and there are plenty more, and of course the eSports comments themselves, is ignorance. And these most recent comments are so unbelievably tame by his standards. I'd be genuinely saddened if anyone in the eSports community were to give him the outrage that he periodically craves. Cowherd is capable of good work. He's critically acclaimed. He's won the highly coveted Sports Illustrated Radio Personality of the Year in 2005. His punditry is, for the most part, informed. His predictions are notoriously accurate. And there is nothing wrong necessarily in its own right with being a polarizing figure. It would be, again, massively hypocritical if I, for example, was to say that there was. But as a broadcaster who, by his own declaration, does a radio show that takes up a lot of his time and writes 30 columns a day, again, his words, I don't think you can expect everything he says to be well researched, if at all. And sometimes the shock jock just has to take a punt. I mean, after all, what's the worst that can happen, right? You upset somebody. Well, that's kind of the reaction you have to aspire to anyway. But all of that said, I think just on the reflection of the evidence, anyone championing Cowherd as someone from the mainstream media whose opinions should be respected and should matter to us in eSports, you can make that viewpoint quite easily subject to ridicule. He's an entertainer, and one would imagine that while he might like to talk about how he tells it like it is, it's highly unlikely that even he believes 100% of what comes tumbling out of his mouth on demand. Now, the other point in all of this, of course, is the debate about whether or not eSports is a sport is really moot at this juncture. And I'm frankly embarrassed when my colleagues and fellow esports professionals engage in it, because the label doesn't really matter at this stage. We've got an infrastructure that's akin to real sports. We've got sponsors and investors of the same stature that will invest in real sports. Think Coca-Cola, American Express, people like this. We've got a fan base and viewership that dwarfs some of these real sports that Cowherd's attempting to champion. And the reality is we're not going anywhere. All of this is only going to improve as we move forward. The success of esports at this point is assured. Now, when a shock jock says something like this, again, a lot of the time they are going for originality. But this isn't even an original standpoint. Following the HBO Real Sports take on League of Legends, Howard Stern said pretty much the same things. He made the same jokes and failed to comprehend the cultural shift in much the same way back in November 2013. And that's why I just think we shouldn't beat our chests. I mean, that made no difference to us. We've grown since Howard Stern lamented the development of esports and said it was a joke. So we don't need to pay lip service to this guy within the context of this particular debate. Plenty of people in the established media feel threatened by the growth of the internet and internet culture. So their first demonstration will always be to attack and discredit it. That will be the first time they get involved. They did it with online reporting. Now they all have websites and are looking, maybe that's the future because they're not making money from the print side of things, as I said earlier. They did it with online broadcasting, and now all of them have their online channels. And now that we've got our own sports that have grown organically through online communities, guess what they do? They attack them. But we continue to grow, we continue to thrive, we continue to be successful. And as that success moves forward, as we keep entering into this, golden age of eSports, with the bar being continually raised and viewing numbers increasing with each passing event, we won't need guys like Cowherd to commentate on our games. So he doesn't need to worry about that. He's really overselling his own importance. He won't be asked by ESPN. There's a reason talent agencies like William Morris Endeavour, who actually represent me, just in the interest of full disclosure, are buying into eSports. It won't be guys like Cowherd getting the jobs when they come along. It'll be the eSports professionals, because we'll have the knowledge, the requisite skills, and if anything, we'll be groomed to be better broadcasters and to fit into those job roles. Anyone trying to resist the change at this point is really just polishing brass on the Titanic. So, again, I can't be outraged at anything he's got to say about what we've done here. Giving it even this level of attention, just recording a video like this, I think, is to give him relevance in an environment where he simply doesn't matter and never will. So instead of getting angry about it, what I would like you all to do, if his comments did upset you, did offend you, if you felt compelled to tweet at him or interact with him, just do what I'm doing, and that's just picture him fishing somewhere, unemployed, and while you're watching your favourite players on the TV station that used to cut him a paycheck. Because I know firsthand, after 10 years of watching this industry grow, eSports is certainly going to outlast Colin Cowherd. So there we are. Anyway, just some quick thoughts on that. And I'm looking forward to seeing you all on the next video. Take care.